Bad news from our friends at the United Nations. The world's going to boil in 12 short years if you don't send the government more money. It's almost like there's a UN climate change conference coming up just around the corner. Nikki Haley just resigned her post as American ambassador to the United Nations, and she says she'll leave by the end of 2018. The UN is such a cesspool, and she was one of the few lights in it. All that's left behind are the dimmest of bulbs, flickering on about the two things the UN seems to obsess most over: Israel and climate change. The doomsday oracles at the United Nations are predicting. Predicting's the wrong word to use here. The UN climateers are promising that if humanity, peoplekind, doesn't take great steps immediately to stop climate change, life as we know it will be over in just 12 years. Look at this article from The Guardian. The world's leading climate scientists have warned there is only a dozen years for global warming to be kept to a maximum of 1.5 degrees Celsius, beyond which even half a degree will significantly worsen the risks of drought, floods, extreme heat, and poverty for hundreds of millions of people. The authors of the landmark report say urgent and unprecedented changes are needed to reach the target, which they say is affordable and feasible, although it lies at the most ambitious end of the Paris Agreement pledge to keep temperatures between 1.5 degrees Celsius and 2 degrees Celsius. And Justin Trudeau's Liberals, well, they are pushing this UN report as a reason we should all get back on board with their carbon tax and then support any subsequent increases to it. This person here is Cameron Ahmad. He does communications for the Prime Minister. This is what he tweeted. Time is running out in the fight against climate change. Conservative politicians need to stop playing politics with the planet and opposing real action without any solutions. And here is Gerald Butts, the former World Wildlife Head and Justin Trudeau's chief advisor, and basically our de facto prime minister, saying that world leaders now have a moral obligation to act on climate change. And here is the Environment Minister, Catherine McKenna, saying in response to this UN report that she's committing to meeting or beating Canada's Paris targets. And she says she knows that Canada needs to do more after that. And when Liberals in power start talking like this about how we need to be more ambitious in our climate actions to reach their UN climate change targets, we all need to be very worried about our pocketbooks. This is from the New York Times. For comparison, the United Nations report estimated that governments would need to impose effective carbon prices of $135 to $5,500 per ton of carbon dioxide pollution by 2030 to keep overall global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Look, Albertans are already struggling with investment capital fleeing the province. We struggle with paying our fuel, electricity, and home heating bills with just a $30 per ton carbon tax. Just to meet the goals the UN, Catherine McKenna, and Justin Trudeau's hand-picked officials think we need to meet, we'd have to have a $5,500 per ton price on carbon pollution, as they call it, in just 12 short years. That's energy poverty. That's nobody but the most elite and richest people in society being able to afford electricity. And home heating and refrigeration for our food, only the richest people will be able to move about freely and afford medicine and even basic hygiene. These UN Armageddon targets will impoverish billions and billions of people. These UN warmists are like a doomsday cult where the true believers stay in the cult even after the promised comet or spaceship or savior doesn't come to pick them up to take them to the new planet. How many times have the smartest people in the room been really, really wrong about global warming or climate change or climate disruption or whatever they'll call it next to move the goalposts when their predictions don't materialize one more time? The American Enterprise Institute did a really, really great breakdown of some of the greatest misses of climate science over the past few decades. For example, climate scientists once told us that we would have an increased frequency of deadly weather as the climate falls into carbon-induced chaos, where the instances of hurricanes and tornadoes are now at the lowest levels in decades. Then the AEI dug up this beauty of a quote. Peter Gunter, a North Texas State University professor, wrote in 1970, demographers agree almost unanimously on the following grim timetable. By 1975, widespread famines will begin in India. These will spread by 1990 to include all of India, Pakistan, China, and the Near East and Africa. By the year 2000, or conceivably sooner, South and Central America will exist under famine conditions. By the year 2000, 30 years from now, the entire world, with the exception of Western Europe, North America, and Australia, will be in famine. Just one more prediction, though, because these are so beautifully, beautifully wrong. In January 1970, Life magazine reported, scientists have solid experimental and theoretical evidence to support the following predictions. In a decade, urban dwellers will have to wear gas masks to survive air pollution. By 1985, air pollution will have reduced the amount of sunlight reaching Earth by 1/2. Remember the hype around the Paris Accord just 3 short years ago? The politicians had to sign the Paris Accord and implement carbon taxes just to save the world from ourselves. The politicians acted as though they truly saved the world at the time. 3 years later, Donald Trump has pulled out of the Paris Accord. He's vehemently against any form of carbon taxation as U.S. emissions fall without one. But we are just 2 short months away from the next UN climate change conference, this time in Poland. And the world is going to boil without enormous increases in taxes. It's formulaic. The end of days keeps getting moved back, but the Armageddon itself, well, it keeps getting more horrible and more intense. Now we only have 12 years left before we all starve. So give the cult money to fix it. Marginalize those outside the cult as not having the special knowledge the cult leaders have. Wash, rinse, repeat, just before every single global warming conference. For the Rebel.media, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. Did you know that we have our own Rebel Media mobile app? It's available on the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. Download it, give it a whirl, and help us fight Silicon Valley censorship wherever you go.